Welcome everyone. Thanks to all participants today and to our sponsor area, the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia. The Asia Network is a digital community of 450 plus thought business and young leaders supporting the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals with our webinar series and conferences. For our webinar today, we are happy to have an exclusive panel of speakers from Hong Kong, Vietnam, and the United States. Today's webinar Tech for Good is related to city sustainability and technology, UrbanTech. At the end, we'll have a Q&A session, so please feel free to write your question in the chat box. Let me introduce you now to our first speakers. Tony Verb is a serial entrepreneur, urban innovator, venture capitalist, and film producer based in Hong Kong, originally from Hungary. He's done business in multiple industries from entertainment to social entrepreneurship. Most relevant to UrbanTech is Greater Bay X, an integrated investment and consulting firm specialized on modern urban development and cross-border smart cities opportunities. His most recent venture is Carbonless Asia, an innovations and investment platform specialized on technology solutions that can help decarbonize Asia. Tony is also an IWC pioneer and a proud member of the World Economic Forum's Global Shaper community. Welcome, Tony. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, Ravindra, with two amazing fellow speakers and a great group of people that just joined. It's a real privilege to be here. I'm a big fan of your work and the community, so I'm very happy to be here. Instead of presenting, and we already aligned on this with Ravindra before, I will just tell this group. I will treat this as a conversation, and I will just start by introducing myself and why I'm doing what I'm doing and why I think it's interesting what we are doing as a company and as a group. And I will just invite everyone to contribute to that if you can. So as Ravindra mentioned, I'm originally from Hungary. I came to Asia by an exchange program back in university, now a long time ago, 15 years ago. And from Singapore, I traveled all around Asia Pacific. I fell in love with Hong Kong, where I ended up moving to, and I've been living in the city for more than a decade. And I'm still considering myself an entrepreneur, but the big difference that happened was that until my age 30, I was an unconscious entrepreneur, unconscious about the impact I was capable of making and about the impact I wanted to make. And I want to credit the World Economic Forum and the Global Shapers community that I got involved in, that opened my eyes to the fact that it was important to be focused on impact and sustainability, and B, it opened up doors to me, to people that were leading the way in impact positive investments and social entrepreneurship, and it was a truly inspiring process. So the question I asked around the age 30, what was the impact I wanted to create in the world? And back then I was in the creative industry and entertainment, and I realized that that's not the kind of impact I wanted to create on the long run. I exited my positions and became a partner of an early stage venture capital fund because I knew that the impact I was about to create was in the space of innovation and technology, because that's where the story of our century was being written. And by that time, I also built a technology company, so it was kind of obvious to step into that direction. Our company called Nest was more and has been more than an early stage venture investor. We've been also running accelerator programs, consulting Fortune 500 companies how to innovate, and governments how to build startup ecosystems. And quite frankly, for me personally, it was a learning process about the industry, about the various verticals, and I was looking for the vertical where I could maximize my personal impact for over the coming decades, because I wanted to commit myself to one vertical only. And it was a good fortune for me that brought me into a leading position to head up the Infinity car brand, which is the luxury car brand under Nissan. And used to be headquartered in Hong Kong, to co-lead the Global Innovation Accelerator program, and it was dedicated to smart cities. And that was my first encounter of the term smart cities about 6 years ago, and very much along the same lines or same weeks, I was invited to participate in a World Economic Forum event called the China Business Roundtable, where I was presented a slide that I can say changed my life. And the slide said that by 2050, more than 2/3 of the world's population will be living in cities. And that equal to 3 million people being born into or moving into cities every single week on average. And that was the sentence and the statistics that made me realize that is the megatrend, that is the fact, that is the long-term thesis that I can anchor myself around, because obviously urbanization, the way it's being, or it has been going on, has not been sustainable, or has not been on a sustainable track. So I thought by bringing impact positive technologies into the process of urbanization, I could maximize my personal impact, and it had the longevity and the global aspect that I was looking for. So shortly after, I established a new platform that was built around this thesis, with a focus on Asia Pacific, anchored by China. And Chinese examples. And it's no accident, obviously, I'm based in Hong Kong. Hong Kong's neighbor is Shenzhen, and Shenzhen just around those times was on track to become the first major city in the world to fully electrify its public transport system, which has happened or has been concluded already. So all the 20,000 taxis in Shenzhen, the entire bus fleet is fully electric, and it was highly inspiring. And many of the companies that have contributed to that process were also based in Shenzhen. So we created the Greater Bay Venture and Advisory Platform to facilitate investments and look for opportunities, cross-border opportunities, in the context of sustainable urban development, helping Chinese and Asian companies going to Europe as much as European and overseas startups access the opportunities in the context of urbanizing Asia. And as we started to raise our first dedicated investment fund around this thesis, we decided to be a bit more precise and specific than a typical venture capital fund. Usually venture capital funds claim to have an ESG policy or an ESG strategy, but ultimately it ends up being just a checklist. And the longer checklist you have, the more sophisticated you look. But the longer the checklist is, the more lost one becomes what the actual impact of the fund and the portfolio companies are. So we wanted to turn this around and be obviously ESG compliant, but focus only on one metric only that we can claim that through our investments and through our activities, this is the kind of measurable impact that we are creating to the world. And obviously, the metric that we wanted to choose was supposed to be the most impactful, the most scalable, the most timely, and obviously from a commercial perspective, also the most investable. And I will save you from the whole process. It took 1.5 years for us to get to this metric and a lot of research, but that became CO2 emissions reduction, i.e. decarbonization. And as we were about to integrate that metric into our fund thesis, we started looking for people and funds that were doing similar things in Asia Pacific, and we realized that there was nobody looking at this metric and having this perspective. And so we decided to spin this perspective off and started to build a new platform with a new team that is laser focused on decarbonization, and decarbonization through an urban lens, and i.e. Looking for technologies that can decarbonize cities, the cities of Asia Pacific, and with scalable and proven solutions. And that is the investment fund we are raising right now. We've made already our first investment, and we are preparing for our first SPV. I'm not sure whether the audience knows what an SPV is, but that's an abbreviation for single-purpose vehicles, when it's kind of a fund but only invests in one specific company. So we are now raising a small fund for a specific company, and our criteria is indeed scalable technologies that can decarbonize three aspects of Asia Pacific, or three aspects of cities, and those three aspects or sub-verticals happen to have the largest carbon footprint in the world and also in Asia Pacific. One being energy, the second transport, the third built environment, and within built environment we mean both property and buildings and also infrastructure. It's a focused thesis, but it's very broad from how opportunistic we can be. And obviously, if we pick the right technologies and we pick the right investments, the impact and the scale the scale of the impact we can create is tremendous. So it happens that over a year or two ago, when we started discussing this with potential partners in Asia Pacific, very few people and very few corporates and even less investors were talking about decarbonization. And just as we were socializing the idea of setting up a Carbonless venture capital fund, which was this time last year, China, South Korea, Japan, and Hong Kong came out with their carbon neutral commitments within about 2 or 3 months. And that's when we knew we were at the right place at the right time with the right intention, and we just started building the theme, going deeper in the theme, I now see Ravindra coming to the screen, and that's our secret code to know that I have only 2 minutes left. So I will kind of fast forward to another important component in our strategy. We work very closely with big corporations as we build capacity and experience in doing that. But when it comes to decarbonization, and not only technology investment, specifically decarbonization, it's crucial that big corporations of the world and Asia Pacific are involved in the process, are involved in the investments, and are involved in incentivized for the rollout of technology solutions, whether it's startups or mature companies that can decarbonize, because ultimately the carbon footprint of Asia Pacific and the industries are generated with the big players within the industries. If they don't decarbonize, if they are not interested or not incentivized to decarbonize, we simply cannot decarbonize. So we are working closely with some of the big emitters in the world. We are doing this through various formats. Obviously, we are inviting the emitters to invest together with us or into our fund, but we're also running innovation programs with a laser focus on measurable and scalable decarbonization solutions or application of such. And our first such program is now running in Hong Kong in partnership with Hong Kong's railway and transport operator MTR, which is very interesting, not only for Hong Kong or not only in Hong Kong, because MTR is a global railway operator with footprint in China, in Australia, in the United Kingdom, in Sweden, and they are expanding worldwide. They are also more than just a transport operator, because they are one of the big property developers of Hong Kong as well. And what we like about this partnership is that MTR has the mindset of not just a transport company, but also an energy and the property and infrastructure company. So an ideal first partner and case study for us. We are just finishing the we are closing the application for this challenge. You can visit it via carbonless.asia URL. If you have a technology solution that can decarbonize MTR's operations, the applications are still open. You're very welcome. And please get in touch if you have any idea. If you have a technology solution, we are looking for people to work with. We are looking for technologies to invest in. So, and we are going to stay here for the coming decade or two. This is a big task we are about to solve with great partners. So, thank you again, Ravindra, and it's a pleasure to meet you all.
Thanks, Tony, for sharing your background and the why behind Carbonless, an innovation and investment platform specialized on technology solutions that help decarbonize Asia. I'm happy now to introduce you to our second guest speakers coming from Vietnam. Ms. Tran Ahn Ngan is the co-founder and CEO of Elevate Mobility, aka QIQ Vietnam. Elevate Mobility mission is to elevate the global public transportation experience by providing the last mile connection between residential areas to buses and train stations. The Elevate shared electric bike system is currently deployed in Eco Park, a 500-hectare smart township with 20,000 residents, 30 kilometers away from Hanoi, and in Hoi An City, in partnership with Hesbridge, Chumi, and GIS, to provide a shared green transportation for these two local areas. Welcome, Jan. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Ravindra, for the introduction, and also thanks, Tony, for the very great presentation just now about yourself and why you are doing this big project and on the development of decarbonization and helping city become smarter and cleaner. So, like, if Tony is about investing and focus on innovation, then I guess I'm on the other side of the table when we build the technology and we provide a solution to solve this smart city problem and transportation problem in Vietnam. So, I'm Ngan. I am the CEO and co-founder of Elevate Mobility. I used to stay in Singapore for 9 years, and actually I just came back to Vietnam 2 years ago. So when I was in Singapore, right, the transportation there is really good, right? Like we have public transportation, the trains and the bus run really well there, right? But in this presentation, I'll be focused more on Vietnam, my hometown, right? Because this is our current project here for Elevate Mobility, right? So when I came back to Vietnam, right, we don't really have a very well developed train system in the big city like Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh City, right? And Vietnam has one of the most polluted cities in the world. And if you see this picture, right, these are the Vietnamese ladies covered in masks even before the COVID-19. And we are called the ninja lit lady because we wear masks and because it's too polluted outside on the road, right? So when I'm back to Vietnam, I face the same problem too, right? There are so many cars and motorized vehicles on the street. There are 18 million personal owned vehicles in Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi alone, right? So people when the tourists come to visit Vietnam, they will talk about how to cross the road because there are too many vehicles. And only 2% of the population in the big city like Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh City, they use public transportation, right? So, although the Vietnamese government is putting out a lot of effort and billions of dollars to solve the problem by improving the public transportation, by improving the bus system, and also putting in the train system in the big city like Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh City. But we also see that because there will be a missing last mile connection solution between the train station and the bus station from these stations to people's house and office and residential area to cover their last mile mobility. So this is actually the problem that we are trying to solve here. Because if we are able to solve the last mile connection problem, we will be able to encourage more and more people to use the public transportation in Vietnam and fully convert them from using the gasoline personal cars and motorbikes to public transportation, right? So overseas we have other solutions like mechanical share bikes or mechanical electric bikes, right? Or share electric scooters in China, US, or in Europe country. But in Vietnam, right, we don't have any system like that. And like for dockless and for dockless system, it can be very unorganized and messy for the street. And those some are very expensive solution to deploy in Vietnam, right? So that's why we come in. That's why we are doing what we do today, right? We want to develop a green, sustainable shared transportation system to make city livable and less jam for our own country, for Vietnam. Yeah, so I started this project in 2018 when I was still in Singapore, but now fully back to Vietnam, and we are more than focused ever to build this to be a good project that we can deploy in many cities in Vietnam. Yeah, so what we do is that we introduce a holistic vehicle control system with application and management back-end system with IoT hardware to connect different types of shared vehicles into the system, right? So we are an end-to-end system for fleet owners, and for end users to simply book a ride on our system. We work with fleet owners so that they can onboard multiple fleets from their classic bike to their electric bike, electric scooters, or any type of electric vehicles thanks to the IoT that we've developed, right? We also work with the OEM manufacturer in Vietnam to provide multiple types of electric vehicle options. And then, right, from this Elevate Mobility app, the user can book a ride on an application to use our shared vehicle system, right? So with that, we are proud to say that we are the first to provide such system in Vietnam. We make money by partnering or selling the system to smart city developers, township owners, anyone who wants to operate such system in their local area. So they can onboard the existing fleet to our system via the IoT or acquire a new vehicle from us. On the other hand, the users can use application by paying like $1 per trip or subscribe at $10 per month, right? So for the last 2 years, we have been acquiring a strategic relationship with the central government of Vietnam, because right now, right, building smart cities is one of the key of not only government in the world, but also in government in Vietnam, right? We partner with TUMI GIZ to deploy our system in Hội An, and we are also working on a project funded by UNDP to provide a last mile mobility system in Hanoi with the University of Transportation here in Hanoi, right? So we're managing 400 vehicles with the 2 cities in Hanoi and Hội An, and one smart city, which is Eco Park that Ravindra has introduced before, right? So during our deployment in Vietnam, in these cities and in these smart cities, right, we managed to interview like 3 city governments, right, and 3 smart city developers with more than 1,000 end users using our system. So we learned that, right, there is a smart city trend emerged in Vietnam. There are so many smart cities being built in Vietnam, from Hanoi to Da Nang, Nha Trang, Ho Chi Minh City, right? And they are all looking forward to adopt smart share system and to adopt electric vehicle system in their own areas. Because their point is that if they allow like all the residents in that area to use their own personal gasoline vehicles, their own motorbikes, right, then their smart city just become another Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh City with traffic jam from the personal owned vehicles. So they are looking to integrating the bus, the internal bus system in the area with a shared system like our system, right? And with this shared system, right, this will help to save costs of transportation infrastructure for these cities, for this area. And transportation data collected from the system when people book a ride on our applications also help us to analyze the pattern that people, when they use a vehicle, when they use to travel from point A to point B, and help the city smart developer to optimize costs and better plan out their transportation system, right? And for the end users, being able to convert into a greener and smarter vehicles is important to them, but the value that we bring to them is the time and cost saving factors, where this is the factor that encourage the use of public transportation. Yeah. So by swapping from their own personal vehicles to the shared vehicles, right, we will be able to transforming millions of people using their own vehicle to public shared electric system. So just by swapping your gasoline cars or electric motorbike to a shared bike, right, you could already save 60% of CO2 produced from transportation, right? And we estimate that with already 50,000 users within the shared system in Vietnam, we already saved more than 4,000 tons of CO2. Yeah. So I mean, in the next few years, our next plan is to continue to work and expand the projects in big cities in Vietnam, like Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City. And we also got the support policy from government when the government is limiting the number of motorbike by 2030, deploying the train system in city and encourage more people to use public transportation. Yeah, so I think we are at the right place at the right time as well. Yeah, and also with the rising number of smart township and industrial parks, right? Smart city in Vietnam. This is also a very key important point for us to expand the system in more cities, make more people use this system and use it more and more. Yeah. So with that, we hope to elevate the transportation experiences of Vietnamese people and everybody. Right? When especially the ladies like me, right? When we go out to the street, we don't need to wear masks anymore because we are living in a greener and less jam environment. Yeah, so that is my my introduction about the elevated mobility, what we are doing here. Yeah.
Thank you, Ngan, for sharing how Quick System aim to provide a greener and more sustainable transportation system for more cities and smart township of Vietnam. We are happy to welcome now our last speakers from the United States. Karthik Balakrishnan builds and leads teams that solve emerging problems which span disciplines and cross borders. He's president and co-founder of Actual, a Silicon Valley-based company whose decision support software enables forward-thinking leaders to create comprehensive, concrete plans to turn ESG goals into reality. Actual works with organizations like GIGA, UNICEF and SoftBank collaboration to connect every school to the internet. Previously, he founded Airbus A3 Altiscope, now called UTM, to modernize the air traffic control system, working with regulators from the USA, EU, UK, China, Singapore, New Zealand, and other nations. Thanks for being there, Karthik. The floor is yours.
Thank you, and it's great to be here. And thanks to Tony and Nan for your great presentation as well, and hopefully I can build on that as well. So let me quickly share my screen here. So I want to talk a little bit today about achieving urban environmental goals. One of the things that we see a lot is, municipalities, companies, set a goal, and it's quite challenging to hit. So I wanted to talk a little bit about a kind of a mental framework for how we at Actual think about actually setting goals and achieving these goals. So just a little bit about Actual. Essentially, companies and governments, increasingly, they have these goals, right? We want to hit net zero by 2050. We want to have X percentage of people using public transportation or shared mobility. We want to switch from maybe point of use water to recycled water for irrigation, a variety of different things. And in general, many of these organizations and governments have a very good sense of where they are today, right? So if you think about a graph, they know where they are today, they know where they want to go, but that pathway of how they're going to get there is very hard and it's very complex to actually chart that course. And so at Actual, we build software to close what we call the ESG gap, right? This helps companies, this helps governments rapidly work through the option space, figure out between all the different kind of options they have, what they're going to do, and get them moving quickly towards their goals. So I'm going to start with a statement that I think pretty much everyone here can agree with, which is that energy is life, right? And I think that if you think about where we use energy and how we use energy, whether it's in agriculture, right, in terms of plowing the fields, fertilization, actually harvesting, sorting into the food system itself, right, preparing, chilling, transporting, pumping and treating water, industry and manufacturing, communications, transportation, healthcare, every single thing that we do requires an energy expenditure, right? So when we talk about turning the tap, getting running water, there's electricity being used to pressurize the water system, right? When we talk about getting onto a bus, when we talk about getting an e-bike, when we talk about getting into a car, there's energy that's being used to take you from point A to point B. So the way that we think about everything is in the framework of energy. How much energy is being used and where is this energy coming from? And so one of the really interesting things that you can start to do is think about how much energy is actually necessary. Before Airbus, I was a graduate student and I was doing a PhD in aerospace engineering, focusing on building satellites. And one of the things about satellites is that the amount of energy you have is very limited. It's a small thing with small batteries and fairly small solar panels. And so what you can do is really limited, and you have to decide at the beginning, what am I trying to do? How much energy do I have? You set an energy budget. And based on the energy budget, you start picking solutions. Well, I need a camera, I need radios, I need all these different things on board the satellite. How much can I actually afford to power, right? And so we start thinking about the Earth in much the same way. How much energy is actually necessary to reach our goals? So we looked at two metrics as part of our framework. One of them is HDI. HDI is not a perfect metric, but it's pretty good in terms of what does quality of life look like for different people. And we were curious to see, how does HDI map with energy? Is there some sort of relationship, right? Can you understand and set an energy budget for an individual based on essentially the HDI? And so we took data from the World Bank, energy data, and we took HDI data from UNDP. And it's interesting, you actually get a very clean curve. So I'll work through this graph because there's a lot on here. And then I'll start to kind of give some conclusions and some insights and how this frames how we think about taking action. The first thing is that each dot is a country. So when you see a dot at here, right, that's a country with an HDI of 0.8, and the average citizen, the average resident of that country, has about 300 kilowatt hours per day that's required to sustain everything that they need. Pumping their water, growing their food, bringing them to and from work, the electricity they use at home. This country, with an HDI of about 0.3, 0.35, is using much less power per citizen, right? There's much less energy available per individual for everything that's necessary. And this starts to make sense because energy is life. So if you want to move from point A to point B, you need energy. If the energy is not there, you can't move from point A to B. So when we started to dive into each of these countries, what we found is that countries that are doing things quite well set an energy budget of about 50 to 100 kilowatt hours per person per day, right? So this is 50 to 100 kilowatt hours, or about 2,000 to 4,000 watts per person to support the food, the water, the transportation, the communications, the power they use at home. So you start to get an energy budget of how much energy is available per person to do everything. So then once you start to build systems, you can start to understand, does this actually fit? So if you're building a transportation system based entirely on cars, right? Well, that car is going to take up a lot of that 50 to 100 kilowatt hours, right? So you start to think about, well, maybe the car doesn't work. Maybe it has to be a bus. Maybe it has to be a scooter. And this is one of those things where it's obvious when you look at it from an energy perspective. But if you don't take it, we end up in the world we have today, which is everyone in cars, everyone in personal vehicles. That starts to make things quite difficult. And the other insight is that simply having more energy by itself doesn't translate to improved HDI. It's about how you use the energy, right? So just having 250 kilowatt hours per person doesn't mean that you're going to have a better quality of life. It comes down to what you decide to spend that energy on, right? Is it fundamentally better to have a gas car that uses a lot of energy versus an e-bike? Not really. In fact, the e-bike might be better quality of life from a healthcare perspective too, right? More exercise, more fresh air, less congested cities, and it fits into the energy budget. So there's a few really interesting takeaways for all these graphs on our website, on our blog, so you can take more time to digest. And the data is from UNDP and from World Bank, so you can download the data sets and recreate them yourselves. But there's a few key takeaways. The first thing is we cannot simply copy the most inefficient societies, right? So in the United States, in many countries in Western Europe, we've built systems before thinking about the energy analysis, right? We simply said, oh, there's infinite energy, it's abundant, so let's go ahead and use the most inefficient methods. That doesn't really work. especially, as Tony mentioned, when you have 3 million people moving to cities every single week. Think about how much energy that requires in those cities to be generated, to be transmitted. It's just not possible. But what's really interesting is that when you start to set the energy budget and realize you can hit development goals with that budget, a climate positive pathway is actually 100% possible. Because if you take 100 kilowatt hours per person per day requirement, you're only talking about doubling the amount of electricity generation in the world, right? So we're not, in order to support that growth of cities, we don't have to grow our generation capacity by 100x or even 10x. It's 2x. But we have to be very, very cognizant of what we're actually powering with that energy, and are we doing things in the most efficient way? Which brings us to number 3, which is energy has diminishing returns. So we have to be very mindful of how we use the energy. So for example, shared bikes, right? Instead of building a superhighway, right? Getting people from point A to point B, getting people onto transit, increasing the number of people getting onto the subway gets people from point A to point B within that energy budget. And so at Actual, we think about sort of a 3-step, 3-pillar way to achieve this. The first thing is what we call mass customization. And I'll talk a little bit in the next slide. And then the second 2 things are getting past analysis paralysis and tracking your plan versus your actual. And I'll talk about that in the slide after, right before I finish up. So mass customization is what we call building solutions that work for a community, a site, or a company based on off-the-shelf solutions, right? Everybody has different needs. So if you go to a factory in one city and you go to a factory building a different product in that same city, they're going to have different needs when it comes to power. They're going to have different needs when it comes to the logistics and transportation, when it comes to water use, when it comes to lighting, etc. However, in general, most of these factories are going to have similar categories of need. And so if you think about the warehouse on the right, they're pulling a variety of off-the-shelf technologies to solve their unique problems, but minimizing custom work. One of the problems that we've seen in the past is that everyone invents their own solution. And so it takes a long time to determine what we're going to do. It takes a long time to design and deploy that. And so what happens is if regions coalesce on a set of high performance options, right? So saying our factories, they're going to primarily be powered by solar plus batteries plus PPAs. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to focus on using shared bikes for transportation across our campuses. So here's a few vendors for that. Essentially, every site, community, or company can benefit from mass production scale because you have a toolbox of options, but benefit from a custom solution because they can assemble it in the right way, as opposed to doing everything from scratch. This is really important because that toolbox can be pre-vetted to fit into that energy budget. My last slide is about getting past analysis paralysis. I see this extremely often with the companies that we work with. They've set a goal that they're going to be decarbonized by 2050. They know that they're polluting a lot today, and they get into this position where they feel like they have to have this perfect plan before they can take the first step. They have to have a perfect plan for 30 years before they can take the first step. That's very hard. So what we say is take a quick start approach. Take the lowest hanging fruit and do it. Right? Instrument it, collect the data, and build momentum. Because it's much better to have one step tested by reality that you can iterate on versus a perfect plan for 30 years that you can't even get moving. That is extremely important. So deploy the first pilot, get your data, show that it works. Yes, you have to have a roadmap, you have to have a goal 30 years down the road. Don't worry about having every single thing mapped out because it's going to slow you down. Once you take the first steps, your entire plan will come together. It's very quite interesting that this happens repeatedly. So I know we're just at my time, so thank you, and I appreciate the time.
Thanks, Karthik, for sharing how to achieve urban development goals and how actual your company can be part of these equations. So we are coming to the Q&A sessions, and we still have 4 minutes before the end of the session, and I saw already one question who pop up from the chat box. So I will ask you directly. So Chanta Siameas is a PhD candidate at Kyoto University in Japan, and he asked, "What do you think about how carbon neutrality can be achieved by 2050?" Who may want to go first for these questions?
Sure, I can take a stab at it.
Sure, Karthik, yes.
Yeah, I think it's definitely possible, but again, it's the analysis paralysis, right? I think that what we're seeing in the US today, right? We're having these debates in Congress about how much money is going to get spent and this and that. It's analysis paralysis. Everyone has a vision of the grand plan, and everyone's grand plan looks different. And what happens is when you bring the people in the room and say, what are you going to do tomorrow? They all say the same thing, right? And so I think that's the really important thing is once you get people moving, you get the stakeholders aligned through action. Because it's very easy to disagree about what we're going to do over 30 years. It's quite different otherwise.
Thank you, Karthik. Okay, perhaps you want to add something, or otherwise?
I'm happy to just say that there's a lot of debate, and just Karthik's point, there's a lot of debate about this. The position I personally take, and our team and our platform Carbonless Asia takes, it almost doesn't matter whether it is theoretically possible or not. The need is so great that we just need to pretend it's possible and do our best to get there, even if it's not possible. And I'm very, very much in line with aligned with Karthik's view. And it's going for the low-hanging fruit. Let get the ball rolling. That's also how we operate as a company, as an investment fund. That's why we go from one deal to another. We just prove that it's possible. We prove to investors that is actually fruitful and commercially attractive to pump capital into these technology solutions, and then try to attract more investors and more capital and help promising companies scale their decarbonization impact across markets. So we just need to do it, and there's no time for contemplation.
Thanks, Tony.
Yeah, totally agree with Tony and Karthik on this point. Yeah, so I think that's also why we are deploying this share system in Vietnam, although that there are many difficulties and it's still very new in Vietnam. Yeah, so we are taking action to do this. And I would say, there are many theories and points and research about this. Like if we could reach carbon neutrality in this year, 2050 or 2040 or 2060 or 2100, right? So, the main point that we do what we can do best for now, and we contribute what we can do to achieve this goal starting from our place, our country, and move to the region and globally. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks, Jan. Before we end these questions, let me ask you a personal question. I will cheat a bit. It will be 2 questions in one. But if you can be concise on these answers, less than 2 minutes per person, it will be nice to manage the time. So we see that COVID-19 and the global economic crisis is forcing cities to revisit and recalibrate long-term strategic plans and economic development strategies. One of the ambitions of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 11 is to make cities and human settlements more inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. So for you, according to your expertise, your implication with your work, what could be the main challenges? This is my first question. And the second, what for you the tech trends and opportunities, let's say, for the futures of cities in 2030? Perhaps, Karthik, you want to go first?
Yeah, I think I'll start with the second one. I think the tech trend really is around electrification. I think that there's and I know, it's hard to say it's a trend because electricity has been around for quite a while, right? But moving from fossil fuel to electric is extremely important. Now, how does that electricity get generated? Are we talking about, in a power plant? Are we talking about solar at point of use with microgrids? Are we talking about green hydrogen, right? Or fuel cells that are then, being generating power? I think that's the beauty of switching to electric at point of use, is that you basically multiply the options that you have in order to how to generate that power to work in the local context. Because then you can start to say, look, we have options that we can use everywhere and generate the electricity sort of in the right way. And I think that really kind of is one of the things that we've seen as part of the SDGs as well, right? Is being able to set down and say, pick a technology and then get moving, right? As opposed to spending years and years and years trying to perfect a new technology, a brand new kind of way. There's always going to be better tech, right? When it comes to communications, when it comes to transportation, when it comes to chemical processes, et cetera. But simply saying, look, the guiding North Star is around electrification. We're going to set an energy budget and move. That's how we hit the goals. And as Tony said, pick lowest hanging fruit and just start doing hit after hit after hit after hit. That's how you hit these goals.
Thanks, Karthik. Ngan, perhaps your last words?
Yeah, right. Okay, so I would say from my perspective, when I deploy this system in Vietnam, right? So many people are still using the gasoline bikes, motorbikes, and cars on their own for their own personal transportation, right? So when we deploy the system, the share system, and encourage more people to use the share system integrated with the bus system. We face some difficulty because they are not used to the new system yet, and there is an education process when we convert them to use their own personal to our vehicles. So I would say that's one of our main challenge, right? Because right now, more and more people, especially after the COVID-19, they are more aware of the global warming issue, and they are more aware of pollution issues, right? So as people are more aware of the issue, and they are more prone to use a greener and smarter solution. So more and more people actually adopt our system in their own area. So they actually use the bicycle to work. They actually use the electric vehicle to go to do their daily grocery trips, right? So that's what I am glad that we are going toward the right direction, that getting more people to deploy and use our system. Yeah.
Thanks.
So just now, right, when Karthik mentioned about the get past the analysis paralysis phase, right? Actually, that's something what we're doing here, right? It's new, it's difficult, but we are doing what we can to be able to deploy the system in a bigger scale. Yeah.
Thanks, Ngan. Tony, the final words before we closing the session?
Yes, I just mentioned two aspects. There are so many, so many factors that are important and crucial, but I will just mention policy and capital. I guess ultimately to make sure that as many people and organizations and stakeholder groups are incentivized to be part of contributing to the sustainable development goals, and from my personal perspective, in the process of decarbonizing cities, which I identify as a crucial task, because the vast majority of the carbon footprint of the human race is generated in cities or through cities, in connection to cities. So it is crucial to decarbonize cities, but there are a lot of stakeholder groups that are benefiting from not doing that. And quite frankly, what's happening these very years and these very weeks, actually, through also COP26, where I have the pleasure and privilege to go and speak at in 2 weeks' time, is actually historic, because a couple of decades ago, there were only a couple of activists campaigning for the awareness of climate change, and how far we've come from that, where actually decarbonization is a sexy investment theme now. I think this is amazing, but it's still just the beginning of a a longer process. We just need to bring more capital into the story. We need to bring more stakeholder groups into the incentivized side of the equation one way or another. But the change is happening, and it's very positive. But once again, the work cannot stop now. Is just the beginning. These are my last thoughts. I hope it was relevant to your question as well, but I tried to make.
Thank you. Thanks again to our guest speakers, Ngan, Tony, and Karthik, for this engaging conversations, and also to all participants today and our sponsor areas, the Economic Research Institute for ASEAN and East Asia. Thanks all again, and see you next time.
See you all. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ravindra.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.